All right, everyone, welcome back. We are going to just jump straight into our panel. So I'm going to turn it over to one of our many great fellows, Terrence Mosley. So thank you, Terrence.
Hey, thank you, Jeremiah. Everyone, you have officially made it to the finish line. How do you feel about that, David? I'll kick off things. My name is Terrence Mosley, and I'm a AAAS Fellow, Science and Technology Policy Fellow in the Building Technologies Office. I want to first say that as an office, we want to thank all of our participants over the past 3 days. No matter what role you played, whether you were a panelist, speaker, just a viewer, BTO or EERE leadership or staff, or especially all of the behind the scenes technical support. And everybody knows what I'm talking about there. Getting through this Zoom excursion has been exciting to say the least. But anyway, no matter what your role has been, it's been very valuable and it's very much appreciated. In a minute, we'll do a poll to find out who all is in the room and who all is participating this afternoon. But I do want to officially welcome everyone to the last session at the BTO peer review, our peer preview, which we are calling From Intention to Action, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Building Efficiency. We felt that this would be a great opportunity for us to have an open dialogue and encourage the sharing of ideas, or as we will call them during this session, journeys, between our office and various stakeholders within the buildings and energy efficiency fields. The first point of order is for us to get a feel for who all is in the room and who all is participating. So Justin, I think we have a Menti poll to see who is represented in the audience. So if you would please, let's see, I think Justin, if you're going to put that in the chat. Okay, here we go. And you can see the Menti code at the top. It's 2570854. If you would go to menti.com and populate that for us, we want to get a feel to see who all's represented today between non-governmental, industry, and so on. So here we go, starting to get populated. We'll give it a minute. All right, labs in the lead so far. And while this is populating though, I will tell you just a little bit of kind of the, I guess, rules of engagement here. What we're going to try to do when we go through the journeys of the different speakers that you hear, as you think of questions, please populate those in the Q&A so that those comments or viewers speaking to each other. But if you would, please put any questions in the Q&A as you listen to the speakers talk, and I'll be able to monitor those much better in that area. All right, we're moving along here. All right, and we'll just take this to kind of be representative of where we are right now. But as you can see, it looks like we have a dominant National Labs audience at this point, with Feds not too far behind, and we do have a good bit in the non-governmental area as well as private industry. And that's kind of the purpose of why we're trying to get together and share ideas. We wanted to get different perspectives from us, number one, as a government agency, from our national labs, from non-governmental entities, and also from private industry. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to our director, Mr. David Nemzo, and he had some comments. And while he's speaking, we'll get ready. Holly, we'll switch over to you so we can be ready to present.
Thanks very much, Terrence. And thank you all. I'm just going to briefly say I'm not supposed to be on, I'm not on this panel, but this panel is about this key issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you've been part of our peer preview this week, you've heard this topic come up many times already. It is not an issue that just fits into one panel or one discussion. It's an issue that permeates all sorts of issues that we work on in building energy efficiency. And that's part of what we'll talk about today, but it's come up all week and with good reason. It's also, I just want to say, I know some of the folks on the panel will be talking on I think a personal note about diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just as a public policy issue, but how they tackle it for themselves and their organizations. So I just want to say briefly, as the director of BTO, that for BTO, we're doing our best to put extra emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, better than we've done in the past. And we do that for many reasons. And I think Holly will talk about this. One is we are members of society, of course, and we need to be make our contributions to a fair and just and productive society. But for me, as a manager, I'm just going to focus on the selfish part here. We do it here because our job is really hard at BTO. We have to deal with very aggressive goals for energy efficiency in the built environment. 125 million buildings in this country. And the challenges are enormous. And we know that we can't do it. It's gonna be hard under any set of circumstances, but we can't do it unless we are inclusive of the views and the backgrounds and the expertise of a very diverse set of players, and diversity on every dimension, whether it's race or gender or educational background or personal experience. We need to be inclusive of that because we have so much to tackle in that enormous diversity represented by energy use in our nation's 125 million buildings. So I just wanted to say that we do this for very selfish reasons. We think it is essential to our success as an office. So I'll let you get back to your panel. Thank you, Terrence, and thank you, panelists, and look forward to hearing from you all.
Hey, no problem. Thank you very much for those comments, David. And I will say that as we cover the agenda, that we definitely want to thank the office for the support they've given us over this past year in our DEI efforts. David, as well as Joan, Karma, Amy, all of the management in BTO, they've been very supportive, and that's what makes this a pleasure to actually present to you, because we're very happy with a lot of the efforts that we've tried to start over this past year, and look forward to much more to come. So anyway, as you see on the screen for the agenda, what I'm going to do is basically, as each group covers their specific journey, I'm going to let each lead person introduce themselves as we go along. I think you'll see that we have a great cast of presenters today. I almost look at it as a 4x100 team, and you know, Holly's wearing her best track shoes, so I'm going to turn it over to her to take the lead. But when we finish the DEI journeys for each group, we're going to follow that up with breakout discussions, and Holly will give more direction on that when we get to that point. Afterwards, we'll do some report outs so that we can, we really look forward to the communication that we'll have among all of us together today. So we're going to try to make sure to be able to make time for as many of the report outs as we can, so we can have really open discussions, and then we'll close out, see where we go from here, and get ready to close this 2020 peer preview down. So anyway, Holly, with that said, I'm going to turn over the first DEI journey to Ms. Holly Carr from the Building Technologies Office.
Thanks, Terrence. You hearing me okay?
Got you fine.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to be here and be a part of this conversation. Our first slide here about why diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I will refer to as DEI for time's sake moving forward, David covered eloquently. We have a ton of work to do, and we need all hands on deck. We need everyone to feel and be valued and included in order to bring their best work to this mission. And that is a big reason why we are so focused on this effort. Since we're talking about journeys today, it's important to understand where we think we're going. And I don't think anyone would say that the Building Technologies Office and our staff are actively constructing barriers to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we want to move to a place where we are actively dismantling barriers. And we also, in order to do that, have to understand where those barriers are and even be able to see them, which can be the first challenge. And to be frank, I had, this used to be a straight line arrow on this slide. And as I was refining it over the past week or so, I thought, you know, we got to be honest here. This is not a straight arrow. And over the past year or so, since we really began this work in earnest in the Building Technologies Office, this has been more the trajectory of the arrow. And that's okay. And we want to acknowledge that. And we also want to acknowledge that this work did not begin 12 or 14 months ago. There have been a lot of activities in this space in our office. These are some of the things that were already happening in the Building Technologies Office in terms of building that STEM pipeline of diverse folks who are coming into this industry and trying to really open up our field and encourage everyone to feel welcomed and valued. So about a year ago, David and my supervisor, Joan Glickman, asked me to focus some of my time on this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really being intentional about it in our office, both with our internal stakeholders, our own people in BTO, as well as our external stakeholders, many of whom are on this call and participating in this conversation today. And to do that, the first thing we did was we started asking new questions, and we had to look beyond our comfort zone and step out. We asked questions like, who's not at the table here? And we started asking this question about just about everything we did. Who's not at the table in Solar Decathlon, the program I work on? Who's not at the table in peer review? We asked the question, what is the gender breakdown of our participants? And we actually asked this question, I think, for the first time about a year ago in our peer review from last year. And we got a very surprising answer when we did that math. And so, asking those questions gives you the clues to where you want to go. And then we looked outside of our comfort zone. Who are we partnering with year after year after year? Who might we also partner with on the work that we're doing? And if we want to go there, we want to go to them, where should we be going? New conferences, new presentations, new activities? What can I try that's new? So, those have been some of the basic questions we've been asking ourselves. We first took action internally in BTO. The first thing that happened was we started a diversity, equity, and inclusion working group of 5 or 6 people who were particularly interested in spending some time on these issues. That group began a monthly DEI lunch discussion open to anyone, and we've had people from outside of BTO participate as well. We've read books, articles, had folks come in and speak to us, just a time once a month to have conversation. We also added DEI questions to our internal employee survey so that we could start to get a sense of, are we improving in these areas over time for our own staff? And then lastly, we spent a lot of time working on a DEI strategic plan that really outlines our activities for coming years. So in that strategic plan, first off, we have room for a DEI lead. So we will have one person who has some actual hours in their week dedicated to making sure that our plan is implemented and that we're tracking things and we're actually doing the work that we say we want to do. One of the most important things I think we put in place in our strategic plan is the incorporation of DEI considerations in individual work plans. So our program managers are helping individual staff members consider diversity, equity, and inclusion when they are setting their goals and milestones for their programs for the year. I will speak to Solar Decathlon since I know it well. When I did this for my work plan for Solar Decathlon, I said, those same questions. Who's not at the table in Solar Decathlon? Well, we have large geographic regions that are often not represented. community colleges, technical colleges tend not to be well represented in our competition. Minority serving institutions, we could do much better. So my goals focus on trying to bring more of those folks into our events and then to help them feel included and successful. So we set up a mentoring program for the first time this year, taking alumni from Solar Decathlon and matching them with teams to help them learn how to do the competition and succeed. So that's an example. And then we'll be tracking what we're doing. Numbers matter. So we'll be taking our strategic plan and reassessing at the end of each year and setting new goals for ourselves for the following fiscal year. I do want to mention a guiding principle that we have used for some pieces of our strategic plan, and that is the idea of moving towards a building energy workforce that is more reflective of the US workforce. So, for example, in 2018, Bureau of Labor shows that 12% of the American workforce is African American, 47% women, 17% Latino. We want to work towards a building energy workforce and participation in our programs that is reflective of the actual workforce. We are not there, but we hope to move towards that. So that's one stake in the ground that we are using as a guide. My Apple Watch is vibrating, and that tells me that my time is up. And I would like to turn it over to Roderick from the National Renewable Energy Lab. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Holly. So I guess I'll set my Apple Watch, so I'll go with yourself as well. So I'll just start to introduce myself. I'm Roderick Jackson. I am the lab program manager at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And so I'm responsible for basically the research product that we do in support and in partnership with the Building Technologies Office. You can Google any other things about me you want to find out, but that's probably sufficient. So I'll go ahead and get started on the presentation. So Holly, are you going to advance, or should I advance, or how will we do the slide? Okay, you'll advance. So, okay, thank you. So next slide, please. So basically, just an overview. I'll go through the why, because I think the why is very important. Why is this important to particular a research organization? We've heard from different folks over the last 3 days, but why is it important to a national laboratory? And then how, and then more specifically, how do we take it from intention to action? So next slide. Okay, so I wanted to start here because I'm a scientist, and I think it's important to outline this in a way that I want to present or pose a different way of looking at why is DEI important. Personally, the social, this is 2020 has been a year. There's a lot of is it socially appropriate and the right thing to do, and I think there's a lot of agreement on that. But and there's also, as David mentioned, particularly when we want to have the best and the brightest, having a diverse workforce is important to do that. But to borrow the theme of a journey, let me just walk you through some of the journey that we and my colleagues at NREL have started to kind of, how do we see DEI? Why is DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, important to a research organization? And if you think about it, as David mentioned and Holly followed up, we have some very aggressive goals. 50% reduction across the entire building stock, 50% or more. And as we look at some in energy, and as we look at some of the cities that particularly that were just presented on some of the carbon goals or other goals that are just around the country, those go from 50% to 80% to even 100%. And you can't achieve that, just simple math. You can't achieve that if you're not applying it across the whole portfolio. So if you think about it, if you have a 50% goal, and your 50% solutions, you have 50% solutions for mixed use developments in Denver, Colorado, but you don't have 50% solutions for a soul food restaurant in Jackson, Mississippi, or that beauty salon in Jackson, Mississippi, the math says that it doesn't work. Or if you have 100% solutions for a neighborhood in Berkeley, California, but you don't have it for the neighborhood in El Paso, Texas, simple math says it doesn't work. So as we started going down this journey as a scientist or engineering organization, it really kind of shifted from this is the right, it is still the right and socially appropriate thing to do. But now it's, if we truly believe that achieving a 50% solution, or for cities, if we truly believe that achieving an 80% solution if that is what we really are working towards, if we don't have a solution set that applies across the whole population, you're fighting against math. And when you fight against math, you lose. So when we buy that premise that we need to have solutions that apply across the whole set, now we say, well, that's equitable. That's equity. Now we have to be equitable. We can't just have a limited market that's apply across the first. And now we started to think about that. Because as an engineer, we typically, we acknowledge that the solution is highly predicated on how we define the problem in the beginning. And if we don't have a diverse workforce that's defining the problem set, then we probably will come up with the right solution for the wrong problem. And so that means that now we have to go back and say, okay, if we truly believe in a 50% or 70, 80 or 100% solution, we have to have a population that reflects the 100% of society. So now we need that diverse workforce. But if that diverse workforce doesn't feel comfortable in being who they are, if we have where, okay, we've done the job, we acknowledge that it's important, and we acknowledge that we need everyone, but now you're only okay if you fit in or if you are like everybody else, or you have to be separate. And we're gonna limit that innovation and that creativity that diversity can truly provide. So now that's inclusive environment. So that's kind of taking a step back. That's the journey, to borrow the phrase. That's the journey that I would say we've been on. Is let's look at DEI and the importance of DEI within the framework or the construct of this is why we come to work every day. And so now I'll move on. And so it's still the same. We still believe in the socially appropriate, and we still believe it's the right thing to do in diversity to really improve the workforce. But now we can shift it to the main organizational mission, and it becomes less of something we do on nights and weekends, more of something we do every day. Everything we do, how are we making sure we're applying to that beauty salon, that barbershop in Jackson, as well as that mixed development and community in Denver? So next slide. So I'll go through the next slides pretty quick, but the how is pretty simple. It can't just be PIs or individuals within the organization. It really has to permeate the entire organization. So in this picture, there's a lot of pictures here, but basically there's our lab director, Dr. Martin Keller, the director of our lab. He's there. He's in multiple pictures here because he understands the value of DEI to organization. We have our social lab director, Johnny Green, all the way to I'm included in PIs. And we're all, it's important throughout the organization and understand that this is something we have to do. And so this is through students, through grad students, et cetera. And this is an example. So that's the why and the how. And so next slide is the what. Some of the what. These are some of the examples. I couldn't go into all of them, but once you establish the why and you have the what, the how, the what becomes easy. We're making sure that projects that we're working on, jumping to STEM, how are we incorporating our DEI into those strategies? How do we engage with other organizations, such as with working with some of the mechanical and aerospace engineering future leaders? It's a seminar series where we're exposing diverse graduate students and giving them mentorship, community outreach. We have a strategy, an intentional strategy for our recruiting and talent acquisition. And then employee resource groups to make sure that we're creating that inclusive environment within the organization. So just to double click a little bit more and on some of the activities that we're doing. And one is a partnership with Jim, because I actually am a alumni of Jim and Terrence as well. And this is something that over the last 3 years, we've done over almost 40 fellows, but next year we have a partnership with the Buildings Office where we will probably have anywhere from 6 to 8 fellows that will be working on building science, building efficiency. And these are some of the best and brightest from around the country. And so this is pretty exciting. We can give you more information there, but like I said, this is just some of the actions that allow us to take that why, apply it to the how. We have the folks from the leadership on, and now these are some specific actions that we're able to do. And so last slide. And so this is just another examples. We have some, from some of the established organizations such as Jim, but now we're even being more creative. We're doing some internal pilot development. How can we work with, oh, how can we work with some of the pilot HBC? How can we pilot a program to say, let's target HBCUs and HSIs that are best suited, and how do we make sure that we partner them with our projects? And then we have a partnership with Spelman, where we're looking at how can we integrate clean energy innovation, building technologies into the portfolio or to the classroom environment. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. Love to talk to you about more, but just for the sake of telling you that, thank you.
Hey, Roderick, thank you so much, though. And I will say that that's one of the reasons why it's important. That's another reason to be diverse within our organizations, is because we all bring different things to the table. And so the GEM Fellowship that he mentioned, that's something that BTO had not done before, as well as DOE. So we are actually joining forces with NREL to do a class of GEM Fellows this year. And, you know, but the more diversity, the more people that we bring to the table, the more ideas that we get. So it's just good for business. So next we have the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance with Mandy Mahoney. And Mandy, I will pass it on. We're right on time, so I'm glad I'm not duplicating introductions. I'll let you handle it.
Thank you, Terrence. And wow, it is just wonderful to be here with everybody today. I've looked through the attendee list and so many fellow Journey people in this. Hello, Steve Dunn out there. Steve Dunn has been with SEIA through some hard times in earlier phase of when there was a thing called ARA, which many of you I'm sure remember. And it's great to see you in this phase too, Steve. We at SEIA find this work joyful, life-giving, and meaningful. And what I'm about to show you is a plan. There's way too many words on all these slides, and we're not going to go through them. But what I share is that it is important to have a really intentional and purposeful plan that fits you as a person and you as an organization. And we've done this through years and through a lot of soul searching. And as I listened to Roderick and to Holly and how your words and how you're coming to this, I think it's beautiful and I applaud you for it. You'll see we have chosen to use words slightly differently. We chose to use diversity, inclusion, and integration. And those words have meaning for us. We chose integration. And as an organization based in the Deep South, we serve 11 states, Virginia to Arkansas to Florida. I remember the conversation where we said, wow, integration, is that the right word we want to use? We've seen a lot of struggles with integration in the region. And we said, yeah, that's exactly one of the reasons we want to use it. But also because we want to, the true meaning of integration also fits what we're trying to do. So Holly, if you could advance the slides. We came up with a statement, our goal, why we wanted to come to this work. It's very standard to things you see in this vein. Keep going. I did a message. I wrote this with Pam Fan, who's our diversity officer. And I made a video and we put it on our website because we thought it was absolutely critical to show how deeply committed from the top that we were. And we got a lot of good feedback about that. Next. And then we defined these terms. We had a subcommittee of the board and our board chair, John Silkey, who's on today. It's with his leadership and the past leadership of the immediate past chair's leadership and commitment that the board and staff have been lockstep in this work. Keep going. And then we looked inside ourselves and said, why? Why do we care? Why is it important to us? And Roderick's vision for math winning is amazing. I love that. I love how you talked about it and it was very clear. And I think with that, we also have to look at the emotional side of this journey. We are human beings and with logic, there is also an emotional component for why, what brings each of us to this. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, which is one of the most racist communities in the South. And so I've had a lot of my own demons from my childhood to unpack as I've done this work. And it's been freeing and life-giving. And I was able to take that darkness and channel it into the positive changes that I want to see manifested in this world. And that's, and my colleagues that see it, that's also what has brought us to the why of this work. Keep going. So we've had a rigorous plan. We put dates with it, and we've studied best practices from the corporate sector, from other nonprofits. We've consulted experts to design our plan, and it has served us well. Keep going. And we still have a lot of work to do. At the current time, we are creating spaces for our own bias trainings. And we're doing that in a group community setting, much like the breakout sessions we'll be going into later in this own session. And that's been really powerful for us. And I'm glad that we are doing it and making time, forcing time amongst the busy schedule of work that we've been doing. What we find is that our work is richer, more effective, deeper, more authentic, because we're doing that work on self and work with our peers. At the beginning, Terrence used a sports analogy, and I grew up playing basketball. My basketball coach in high school would always say, you play how you practice. And I think that's very true with work around diversity, inclusion, and integration. If we're not pushing ourselves, if we're not working with our teams to really own this work, then how in the world are we ever going to go out and work externally in a meaningful and authentic way? I don't think you can. I think we have to do the work on self first. And so that's part of this plan, is guiding us through that. Next. Finally, we do want this work to manifest externally. The South is the land of former plantations and the land where the civil rights battles took place. And we have had deeply racist policies in our region. And the ghosts of those policies are still alive and well. They manifest currently in housing stock that is in very poor quality, in which it's hard to live in because it's probably moldy and mildewy. It makes you more susceptible to things like COVID. And it also gives you really, really high energy bills. Atlanta, for instance, has the 4th highest energy burden of any city in the nation. Memphis is the #1. All the top cities are here in our region. And we believe it's critical to look back at how we got here. Not just that we have a decrepit housing stock, but that is disproportionately where Black and brown people live. But why? The redlining of a century ago is still driving that today. The lack of people to be able to get loans in our region to upgrade their homes in the 60s, that is still with us today. And so the work of BTO is critical. We have got to figure out ways so that the first cost of technology is not an impediment to solving these deep problems that Black and brown people in the Southeast are facing. And we have found that by doing the work of diversity, integration, and inclusion, we see our staff, our board has different conversations. There was a question in the chat that posed, is diversity important over the qualifications of a person? I think that that's a false question. I think we need to take a step back from and ask, what are the qualifications that we really need? What kind of talents, what kind of skills? Because we are a very wonky group of people. in our field. And we've got a long way to go to truly solve our problems. So I think that by us looking at this topic, we'll be able to be more inclusive. And Roderick, I love that you brought up the HBCUs. We here in Atlanta are so fortunate to have many of them. And we're so fortunate to have graduates of Spelman and Morehouse at SIA. And they bring a richness that is really powerful. So I encourage y'all to bring, look at the way that Roderick is forming those partnerships. The HBCUs are just amazing places. So I will now pass it back.
Mandy, thank you so much. You make a great third leg. Hey, when I get to Atlanta, we'll shoot some hoops.
Great.
But anyway, I do want you to know, just as a quick comment on that, though, a lot of the work that you guys do has influenced some of what we try to do at BTO as well, because, you know, working with Will Bryan and Maggie Kelly from your organization, I've started incorporating more energy burden slides when we present on zero energy ready homes to people, because, you know, we need to get back to the why we're trying to do this. And when people bring up first cost as an issue, when you look at the long-term benefits versus any additional first cost for improving the housing stock, whether it's through retrofit or new construction, it's just no question what should be done. So I appreciate the work that you guys do.
Thank you. And I just put a link to our energy and security work in the chat. So thank you for lifting that up. Absolutely,
no problem. And we'll move on to our anchor leg here with the company Lendlease. And we have Chun-Yi Yip, who is participating from this group. And so Chun-Yi, if you would please take over, we'll turn it over to you.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Is that a thumbs up? Terrence, you can hear me?
I got you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm never sure because Zoom and all these virtual technologies, am I on mute, not on mute? So many signals. Hello, everyone. My name is Chun-Yi Yip, and I'm the Director of External Partnerships at Lendlease, International Property and Infrastructure Group. Thanks so much for inviting Lendlease to be a part of this conversation. Really pleased to be able to share how our company is promoting economic prosperity in the construction industry and how this is one of the ways we're striving to promote social equity in the communities where we have a presence. Next slide, please, Holly. Just a little about Lendlease. As a developer, builder, and manager of assets globally, we create or aim to create the best places to live, work, and play in. Headquarters in Sydney, Australia. We have approximately 11,000 employees worldwide, located across 4 regions: Australia, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. We operate in 17 cities across 8 countries. You might know us for some of our public and cultural projects, such as the Sydney Opera House, 9/11 Memorial in New York City, and the London's Tate Britain Museum. Next slide, please. Founded in 1958, Lendlease has been guided by 2 very straightforward principles: doing the right thing and leaving a positive legacy for future generations. And to leave a legacy people care about and to be a place where people want to work with and for, we measure our impact and the value we create across 5 different focus areas: health and safety, financial, our people, our customers, and sustainability. Next slide, please. In aspiring to our vision to create the best places, we are doing this under the umbrella of our sustainability framework. In the framework, there are 3 key sustainability imperatives across, you'll see on top: promoting sustainable economic growth, creating vibrant communities and cities, and ensuring a healthy planet with healthy people in it. And underneath each of those imperatives, there's environmental and social focuses. So the first line, we have environmental, the resources and materials that we use, taking climate action, addressing nature and pollution. And then underneath that, we have our social focuses. And for the purpose of today's conversation, we'll be focusing on economic prosperity, specifically on workforce development efforts in the construction industry. Next slide, please. So what is the workforce problem we would like to solve? And what is the potential opportunity to generate employment pathways in the construction industry? Well, we know there's a growing demand for construction, yet the industry is facing labor shortages, and there's increasingly aging workforce. We also recognize there's a lack of diversity in the sector, specifically underrepresentation of minorities and women. And we also know that the trades are good jobs with family supporting wages, and there are opportunities for advancement. This offers a real opportunity for Lendlease to take steps in bridging the skills labor gap by reducing barriers for entry to those interested in starting a career in construction. Next slide, please. So how is Lendlease generating workforce opportunities in the communities where we operate? Well, to bridge the skilled workforce gap, there's a need to support career and technical education, to diversify the workforce, and to work on changing the perception around trade jobs, breaking the myth that construction jobs don't pay well. And we're doing this in 3 different ways. The first is providing support and funding to create employment pathways. The second is to integrate diversity, like supplier diversity, throughout our hiring and procurement decisions. And the third is partnering with industry leaders and organizations that make an impact in this space. Next slide, please. You'll see here that the workforce development ecosystem for job seekers in the trades is very complex and it varies. And we're learning that this access to support in addressing these different needs are incredibly fragmented. Along the spectrum you see here on the very left, we start with recruitment of job seekers and the assessment of their work readiness. Is the construction trade the route that makes sense for them? Are they ready physically and mentally to endure this type of work and this culture? And then the next stage is to support the job seekers who cannot afford, let's say, equipment, boots, supplies, transportation to get to their training, childcare if maybe you're a primary caregiver at home to attend the training. There's a need to have supportive services to help offset these employment costs. And then the next step is getting them into a pre-apprenticeship training program to learn about the trade and prepare them for the exams. Meeting math and reading proficiency is key. It's a key step in getting that job. And then after the pre-apprenticeship training, the job seekers apply to a trade. And then that leads to job placement. And while they're there, there's always the question of retention. You know, is this something that now they're in it, does it still make sense? Do they still want to be in? Does the culture work for them? And while they're on the job, there's also coaching and additional training for continuous upskilling and advancement, thinking about mentoring so that, you know, folks can continue on that pathway for advancement. Next slide, please. We couldn't do this work really without great partners. And you'll see here, we've got some highlighted partnerships that we engage with. And to address workforce development needs in the sector, we work with many nonprofit organizations and local community-based organizations that promote programs to get folks into careers in the trades. So funding for programs range from mentoring young people interested in seeking careers in the construction industry, to promoting women in pre-apprenticeship training programs, to providing supportive services to underrepresented communities. Establishing these partnerships has been a key step in bridging the skill labor gap and in reducing barriers to entry for those interested in starting a career in the sector. Next slide, please. We're pleased to share that in less than 18 months, we're starting to see positive outcomes from our workforce development efforts. To date, we've reached about 125 job seekers. 50% of them are nearly women. More than 80% of the folks are minorities and 18% veterans. And more than 80% of the job candidates are either in the process of applying to a trade or have been placed in a trade and working. Now, our work in the property sector plays a significant role in supporting sustainable economic growth growth that recognizes the importance in creating pathways for economic prosperity in the communities where we operate. And the aim is to develop, build, and manage our assets while being both sustainable and also economically viable. Next slide, please. So what's next? We kicked off our workforce development initiatives in Chicago and have started to pilot in New York this year. And we have plans to extend these efforts to our other markets. Pre-COVID, we started conducting project site tours with our pre-apprenticeship trainees, but we've had to put a pause on those because of social distancing requirements. But these tours are really important in giving folks the firsthand experience on what it's like to be on a construction site. This is something we like to do more of and explore, hopefully after we figure out what's happening with COVID-19 and we can have trainees visit our project sites. We're also looking at any emerging trends in the property sector to guide us on what the needs are in the future. What do construction jobs of the future actually look like? And we see here opportunity to partner with more organizations to support the construction trades pipeline. We recognize that this is a journey that we're on and things are evolving all the time. I mean, we didn't anticipate that the impacts of COVID-19 would be the new norm that we're living in. And we're starting already to see new trends take place in enhancing training needs, like more virtual and online training, and how to create hybrid approaches for folks that are training, you know, for practical experience and also what can be done remotely. And, you know, we're staying in tune with our partners to see where this will lead us next. Thank you guys for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the work that we're doing in this space. So to the next panelist.
All right, Chenyi, thank you so much. And what we'll do, we are like so just right on time. It's working well. And what we'll do, we'll try to slip in a couple of questions that we've been getting filled in from the Q&A box. So I'm just going to start off with a couple, and we'll just kind of quickly go around, or whichever one of the panelists want to give a crack at it. But one question that came in is, how do you open the door to your staffs for receiving feedback to management regarding DEI issues? So, you know, kind of how do you start the conversation, or at least give the open door to be able to make your employees feel comfortable doing that? So anyone that wants to jump in, please.
We have created structures we call caring conversations, and that was developed again by our diversity officer, Pam Fan, and it is 90-minute conversations that can be on a range of topics. One of them was on the killing of Ahmaud Arbery here in Georgia in the spring, and we've also tackled, you know, other issues embedded in this conversation. And what has happened is it gives people the space to test out the waters and see if I mean what I say we're valuing. And by being able to demonstrate that we can stand in that vulnerability and stand in that hard conversations, people are more willing to speak up. And what I've also learned is the scarier and harder the conversation is on anything related to diversity, integration, and inclusion, the more important it is to have as fast as you can possibly have it, and to have it with integrity, to have it with non-judgment. But we've had to just create really formal spaces for it, and that has served us well. We've done that also with our board of directors, and that's been very powerful.
Well, you know, that was one of the things I was going to mention when it came to you all, Mandy, is that, you know, that's part of the reason why we thought it was important to have an organization like yours that has a different reporting structure. You know, you have a board, you have your internal staff. You know, Chenyi has, you know, she's part of private industry, which is structured a different way. And then, you know, the labs and us as a governmental agency. And so, you know, just to give a quick, you know, I guess, plug from our standpoint is that, you know, I mentioned it at the beginning, but our management was really open to us having a DEI working group, and within that working group, when we have meetings, you know, we always like to say that it's a safe space, and that people can really bring up issues that are important to them and things that they want to see brought up, because we bring up issues not only of race, but of, you know, of gender, of whether it's physical disabilities, whatever it might be, you know, whatever's important to people, we want to make sure to be as inclusive as possible when it comes to our office. So, you know, so I just wanted to bring that up as well. But anyway, Roderick or Chunyi, if you want to comment.
I'll give a couple of answers. I'll give some examples, but I think it's really the tone that leadership sets. So, you know, for us at NREL, I'll say starting with the lab director, you know, he's been open and transparent in that, you know, he's originally from Germany, and some of these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are new to him as, you know, a foreign national. And so, but he's been open, and he's talked about his own journey. And then, and so he actually came to the Black Employee Resource Group and just listened. I want to learn. He was very open and transparent. And then also from like the whole organization, I would say from our social lab director, Dr. Johnny Green, early in the summer when there was a lot of tension, particularly racial tension, and even in Colorado, we had Elijah McClain. So there was just a lot going on, and so we actually had an open session. It was for, and it was very transparent. Both Johnny and myself, both of us being Black Americans, and so we were very transparent, and we shared our own stories. Of just growing up in the Deep South, and some of the experience even that we've had in living in Denver, in Colorado. And just by that leadership tone that we set, that provided a space that individuals could know that, well, I can go to and talk to my management because I know that the senior leaders at the organization are supportive of this. So I think that's one of the critical ways is just the tone that the senior leadership sets.
And Chunyi, please feel free.
Yeah, happy to share some thoughts around how Lend-Lease has been addressing some of these from an employee perspective. The presentation earlier was much more about tradespeople. So we don't hire those folks directly, but they do work on our project sites. From Lend-Lease employees, you know, back to Roderick, the tops down is very important, but we've got a very strong bottoms up as well. We've always had a multicultural employee resource group that existed in the company, and I think it's about 5 years old. And then we also do regular people surveys driven by our HR department, people and culture, to get a gauge on sort of the temperature, right? Morale, engagement, and there are questions in there that include, you know, sort of how do you feel like you're part of the Lend-Lease family, right? So questions around inclusion. And then post Black Lives Matter movement, I would say that the company really had to take a much more even deeper look, right, into ourselves and what are some of the things that we can do better. And we started with listening sessions and having folks from all backgrounds share their experiences about being a Lend-Lease and what it's like, whether it's from a recruitment standpoint, advancement standpoint, and from that, we created the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council, and that was really led from our leadership. And we brought on board consultants that are working with our leaders and different individuals across our business units being represented on it to really think about our D&I strategy. How can we make it better, right? Like, we're doing some things, we're on a journey, and how can we really be much more inclusive? We also, interestingly enough, starting to think about the bottoms up piece. We've had 2 employees based out on our West Coast that have started this Racial Equity 101. They're now on 202. And it's a series of talks that they've been doing bi-weekly, and all employees are open to, you know, sign on and join. And they're using pop culture, music, movies, and books, literature, to talk about the Black experience. But also, I mean, the group was founded by a Black American and also a Jewish American. So the two of them offer different perspectives of how growing up in their American experience, and the similarities and the differences, and is almost like just kind of listening in and learning like you're in university again. And I think that's been very helpful too. And our leadership's been very open about having these different outlets and channels for folks to express and share their experiences.
And Terrence, can I add one more? I think going back to the
Please.
theme of the session,
Mhm.
from intention to action, I think, so one of the things that the lab did was hire a diversity and inclusion officer who reported directly to the lab director. And I think he came on maybe in November of last year. And so he went and was taking actionable steps. And one of the first things was really establishing these employee resource groups. So there's, I think the women's resource group was one of the first ones. It was already kind of moving along. So it created these safe spaces where, in addition to creating the environment to everyone else, in management and some of the leadership, but now you have these employee resource groups. You have the women's group, you have a Black group, you have multiple groups, and I think those have been super helpful in this process as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Rod. Holly, if you will, speak to the breakout sessions and how we're going to go from here.
All right, Holly, and it looks like you're on your phone. If you're on your phone, press *6 and it should unmute you.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Can folks hear me now?
We got you. We got
Okay.
you.
What I was saying is this is going to be perhaps the most challenging thing we've done all week, but we can do it. You should be seeing a slide now of how we're going to move into breakout rooms. You are currently in the Zoom webinar, and you're going to see two links come into the chat for you. One is meeting 1, which is for last names A through M, and the other is meeting 2, which is for last names N through Z. When you click on the meeting link associated with your last name, you'll be taken to that meeting and then automatically put into a breakout group of no more than 20 folks, probably fewer than that. We have folks from our diversity, equity, and inclusion working group, as well as some great volunteers from SIA, who we're really grateful for, who have volunteered to act as facilitators in these breakout sessions. If you happen to get a group that does not have a facilitator for whatever reason, don't worry, just talk amongst yourselves. You don't necessarily need a facilitator to have this conversation, but it would be helpful. And you're going to want to also select a note taker who will come back and report out when we come back to the webinar. So you'll get warnings of 5 minutes to go in your breakout and 1 minute to go in your breakout. And then you will automatically be returned to either meeting 1 or meeting 2, wherever you started. And then you'll receive a link to bring you right back here to this full Zoom webinar. And when we get back to the webinar, we'll do some report outs. We have enough folks on this session that we will not have time for everybody to report out from their groups, but we'll do the best that we can. If you could advance to the next slide, Terrence, and just show the discussion questions that we're putting forth.
Well, let's see.
We really
Yes,
just want this
we've got it up now.
Okay, we really just want this to be a conversation. You know, what struck you about what you heard from the panelists and what their organizations are doing? Are any of those things things that you might want to try in your organization? Has your organization already started this journey? What are you doing in your organization that you might want to share with others? And lastly, where do we go from here? Are there ways that you might like to continue this conversation outside of this preview with BTO? So think about those things, have someone take notes, and we will see you back here in about 15 minutes or so. Terrence, are folks able to see the meeting link?
So Holly, the meeting links are in the chat right now. I believe whoever was sharing the slides might have jumped out if they were in a session as well.
Great.
This is David. For what it's worth, I've been clicking away for 3 minutes on the N to Z one and it's not doing anything. I don't know if that's because I'm a panelist, but it's just, I'm still here.
Could you put the meeting links back in? I just got into the Zoom again, and so I don't have any of the chat history.
Yep, let me see here. I will copy what, oh, Jeremiah just did it again.
David, I'm not sure what's going on in your end.
I see. I had closed my browser. Maybe that's it. Maybe it
okay.
couldn't handle
Both links work for me, so.
Okay, good.
Yep.
I'm still not able to see the links in the chat. There we go. Got it.
I don't know if anybody from the tech team is still around, but John Maddle has said they can't see links anywhere, and I tried to click to send a direct response back, but that's not able to happen. Don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
Let me try. I'm going to copy and paste it into the Q&A. I think I can. We'll see if he can see it there. Well, no, it actually won't let me use the Q&A feature.
Julia, as someone that's still in the audience, assuming you're still here, can you copy and paste from the chat into the Q&A for us?
And Julia, since I see you're still there, I've given you can speak now. So if you're muted, we can hear you. So if you can see those, if you'll let us know.
I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Can you see the links that Jeremiah's been putting in the chat?
I have, it looks like I have it from 2:18 p.m. Oh no, that's someone asking for the link. Let me see.
I'm looking and it looks like other people have copy and pasted it as well.
Okay, yeah, I see from 2:17 where he has for A through M and then N through Z. And
Okay.
do you need me to send those out anywhere?
As panelists, we can't use the Q&A feature, so can you just paste them in the Q&A? That'd be great.
Yes, let me do that right now.
And looking at the attendee list, it does look like most people, I think we were up over 200 when they first began, and we have 43 now. So I think most people have been able to get over to the breakout rooms.
Just out of curiosity, what were those numbers again, Justin?
I believe when I looked last time, it was around 230 was the participants we had in the room before we went to breakouts.
I thought you were talking about numbers that you knew were in the breakouts. Okay.
Oh, no. I can ask Andrew and Kate real fast how many people they actually have in those rooms.
Yeah, I'm just out of curiosity.
Can you guys see in the chat if what I just offered came through?
Yeah, I do see it. I would say it looks like they would have to copy and paste the link from that, but the links are there. I do see those.
Okay.
Hey, Jeremiah, can you hear me?
Sorry about that. Yes, I was trying to find the mute. Yes.
So Kate and Andrew in those breakout rooms, they're wanting to know, and I sent in our group text, what time do they need to start pushing the
Yeah.
5 minute and 1 minute? Is it
Yeah,
2:30 and then
I was just
2:34?
about to respond to that. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Because I said I rounded it to 2:20 when they broke, so 2:30 for the 5-minute warning, and then 2:34 for the 1-minute warning. And then they'll push the link again when it's time.
Yeah, I'll let them know to bring
return.
everybody back.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, no problem. And so I heard back from Kate. She had 5 to 6 people in all of her breakout rooms. And she said one room had 4. So that would be, I think there was, 20 rooms in each. So she had about 100 people in hers.
Okay.
So that would be about right. If Andrew had the same, that would be almost where we were at with the 230 or 240 people in here.
Okay. Great. Awesome.
Hey, Mandy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I think we've done it.
Great.
All right, I see 115 people coming back into the room. Numbers are rising. This is a miracle of BTO preview
Do you guys
2020.
see the questions? I shared my
See the
screen.
questions.
Perfect.
Yes.
Oh
Good
my
work. Good work, BTO staff.
Hey, Mandy, that was that behind the scenes work I was talking about.
Y'all did it. Good work.
Oh,
All right, people are making their way back in. So Terrence, why don't we go ahead and start the popcorn discussion, and people can, continue to make their way back in.
that sounds perfect. And I tell you, let's see here. Let me put my participants up here so that I can see some raised hands. But I tell you what, out of the group that we have back with us now, can we get a participant? Can we get a note taker to volunteer to answer a couple of questions from your group? And I'm trying to see. Let's see here.
Hey, Terrence, I can help you out if you need it.
Yes, please.
I see Karma Sawyer and Tanya Barham. So I don't know who you want to start with.
Hey, that's perfect. Let's start with Karma.
Okay. Can you guys unmute Karma? I don't have that ability. Great.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Hey,
Yes,
we
we
got
can.
you.
Great. Okay, I'm going to make it quick because I know that there were a lot of sessions, but I had the privilege to be in a working group with 3 other very talented and wise women. So I'm glad that I get to share a little bit about what we talked about. One thing that came up, all of our ideas did kind of coalesce, was this idea that people really like to work with people that are like them. And we need to figure out how to be allies to those folks without speaking on their behalf, especially if, like, for example, someone used these idea of people having accents and, people, that being something that will like shut down conversation in some group. And you want to be able to lift up those voices, but without, again, speaking on their behalf, and figuring out the logistics of these type of relationships, whether it's if you're mentoring people, making sure that you're not only mentoring people that look like you, or joining teams, proposal teams, for example, make sure that those teams are diverse. And this person in particular referenced that those diverse teams can really result in some out-of-the-box ideas, research ideas. And one of the other points we talked about was for DOE and BTO to really take the time to understand how our leadership from the federal government perspective can be really valuable to give the research community at the lab space to think about issues like how diverse are their teams, and are they getting out of the box ideas, and do we at DOE take the time to say that we care about there being a diverse and healthy and equitable and inclusive work environment at the labs and at the other organizations that we partner with. So I got a lot from hearing them say, what would be helpful for BTO to do. And I'm very grateful to have had a few minutes to talk to them.
Fantastic. Jeremiah, I think you've got the next couple in line.
Sure, yeah, we got Tanya's up next. So if you guys could unmute Tanya, that'd be great.
Fantastic.
Hey, Jeremiah, I don't see a Tanya. Hold on one second.
Oh, yeah, it looks like they disappeared. So next up is David Heslin.
Hold on,
right.
I did find Tanya, sorry. Here we go.
Oh.
Okay.
Tanya, you should be able to unmute your mic now.
Hi, thank you. Tanya Barham with Community Energy Labs. I had a Tanya in my group too, and Mark and John. So wanted to just acknowledge my group had some really interesting, covered a lot of ground in 10 minutes. But some of the things that Tanya talked about in her organization that I thought were really interesting were putting in metrics at all stages of the pipeline. So looking at their supplier diversity, looking at their recruitment pipeline, their retention rates, their promotion rates, the cadences, which with a cascade communication from leadership. So she mentioned one thing. She said, you know, it's really unfortunate in our organization that we are really doing so much to monitor and address DEI efforts, but that it may not always be apparent because we're not communicating that to every level of the organization. So that was an area where she said, you know, making sure that you're not just doing good work, but you're being intentional about how you communicate and engage people all up and down the organizational hierarchy in a larger organization. John talked about workforces that had very diverse labor pools, and we had a discussion about the stratification of the workforce. So I had worked on the Navajo plants years ago where the majority of the workforce was Navajo, but the management of Navajo Generating Station were white and Mormon. So how do we look at the way talent progresses through the pipeline and the barriers to that progression? And then I talked a little bit about my experience as a startup and our attempt to diversify and some of the difficulty with startups when you're working for lower wages and equity, and underrepresented founders don't have as much institutional wealth to rely on in that regard. So creative ways to diversify our advisory board and to work with organizations like FLIR, Emerging Leadership Institute, that are doing recruitment from, much like your GEM program, that are helping us find young, flexible people who can be some of the early leaders in our organization and making sure that they're there from the beginning. So that's what we discussed, a number of different strategies and tactics, and thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, Tanya, thank you very much. And one thing that's important about that is, once again, that's the reason we had the variety of presenters we did today, because like an organization like you're talking about there that maybe has a board, that's why we wanted to present to you what SIA is doing, for instance, because I've been able to see for myself that their board has been as active as the organization has, because they know that it's an important issue that needs to be addressed. So that's why we want to start these conversations. So please feel free to reach out to panelists and go from there. One thing, Jeremiah, I know we had David. I'm going to call on him in a second, but before we get to David, from the note takers, I want to make sure that that we get some feedback from people that didn't have experience with DEI in their organizations as well. So, please raise your hand if you want to bring that forward as well. So, David Haslam, my friend, what do you have for us? Can we unmute David?
All right, can you hear me now, Terrence?
Yes, gotcha, my friend.
Okay, great. Well, this is David Haslam, the Executive Director at Earth Advantage. I was the note taker for a group of 6 people. With Nikita Radhakrishnan was our facilitator, Steve Dunn from BTO, Edward Louie from PNNL, Cassie Grimes, who's a new addition, and Deb Banerjee, who's a professor at Texas A&M. And I thought I would just share like the one example really that Deb brought forward, where they have an NSF grant around studying how sexual harassment is affecting STEM education. And that he had actually come up with a module to teach the engineering students, because they graduate over 1,000 engineering students a year there. And so they developed an educational model for talking about sexual harassment and DEI issues. And even though the surveys were showing that the students, like it was really making change for students, because they survey them at the beginning and at the end of the classwork, and then it seemed successful changing, getting understanding, maybe changing attitudes. But he was surprised that some professors were stating that they were uncomfortable teaching the module, and digging in a little deeper, it seemed like it was especially white male instructors felt discomfort, talking about these issues. So that was like a really good example. And then we just dug in a little bit about like the concept of white fragility, and how this is actually something that, it gets written about. There's books about it. There's resources for people to talk about it, and how, like personally, I've seen that in our DEI work over the years, internally and with partners. And just being able to address that and recognize that, people need to do the personal work and the organizational work when they bring themselves to these topics. And that, I guess one thing would be, there is patience needed. Like oftentimes you can't expect folks will get that understanding right away. It takes a little time oftentimes for people to do the work.
Right. And great points there as well. And I think it's important to remember too that, you know, every organization isn't going to necessarily have mentors that look like you in all situations. You know, that might not be available in some cases. So it's important that we work to keep conversations going to make people a little more comfortable in filling roles like that. You know, even within our office, you know, I look at my mentors, my immediate mentors like Sam Rashkin and Eric Whirling and Joan Glickman and Karma Sawyer, all of the people there. They're not African American, but they're people, and they're very open to ideas and conversation. And I think that's part of what's important for all of our organizations, is just to be open to discuss and just make others feel more comfortable within our various organizations, and that'll continue to improve. So so thanks for that comment. Jeremiah, do you see any others at this point? I know we're getting close to time here, so I want to be careful with that. But you know, Jeremiah, you can let me know if you see
I see two others. We have Michael DeRue from NREL, and then we have I believe Dr. Olu is how I've seen his emails come across to me, so that's what I'll refer to him as.
Right. Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's do it in order. If we can unmute the first Michael. Let's see, Michael DeRue, can we get him unmuted?
Yeah, I'm here now.
All right, there you go. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so I was the note taker. When fortunate to be working with Terrence as the moderator, and had some great discussions around this topic. And there was, I think the two organizations, the other organizations that we had initially talked about having these DEI groups, and one specifically actually even called it Diversity, Racial Equity and Inclusion Group, organized by the employees. And one of the themes was there was a good, discussions. They've started these discussions and everybody's open to these, but implementation, taking action is slower, and it's going to take some time. And then Mark LaFrance was also in the group and had brought up three challenges for diversity in the building sector. One is that there's very few women in civil and mechanical architectural engineering programs. So trying to increase that is important. And then he had there's a lot of, but there is a broader diversity in other sciences and engineering. So trying to promote and keep more of those scientists in the building sector is something we should think about. And then he brought up the point that the construction workforce is often very diverse, but there's no good pathway to go from labor to business owner or leader, or in the construction industry. So there's a need for training to make that leap. And then Terrence brought up a good point that there's also a need for education, training around new technologies, around energy efficiency opportunities, that people tend to, do things the way they've always done. But we need to have a more concerted effort for training opportunities in energy efficiency and understanding new technologies. Anything else, Terrence, that I missed?
No, you captured it beautifully. I appreciate you. Appreciate you taking notes for us. Jeremiah, I think we have one more that we'll catch, and we want to do a last question to kind of wrap everything up. So I think it was Dr. Olu?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Olu, I believe, is that Dr. Olu from our Jump into STEM?
Yes, sir. How are you today?
Good to hear from you, my friend. All right, we can't wait to see you again for the competition this year.
Looking forward. I think it's a very exciting break group, and I was note taker there, and we have diversity through direct engagement. We hear from Dr. Eric Welling, Dr. Kim Tribert, and Dr. Roderick Jackson. I do believe with the Eric Welling, the JEDI program is a very good direct diversity program, which again goes through mentoring of students. They do competition. They have about 75 teams member. Actually, they do collaboration with the Decathlon. And I do believe Terence was among the resource personnel. That's our Terence mostly, recruited for that also. So through mentorship, there was great participation. I'm very familiar with the Jump into STEM through Dr. Kim Tribert and Melissa and Mary from the DOE headquarters. That was a program that at least engages both the faculty and the students. And from the challenge point of view, the students were exposed to building sciences. And that really greatly impact our students. Is a thing that they look forward to. That's very good. I seize the opportunity to also thank Dr. Roderick Jackson because of the impact that he's also making on some of the minority students within the HBCU. I do believe those programs that was discussed in our session are very powerful. They are in the right direction in terms of diversity through direct engagement. So those that may be in doubt can check those two programs out to see how diversity program can impact a community. We really appreciate that, and thanks to DOE overall. They didn't pay me to do that. I just feel it was a very good session that we had. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. What I'll do, you can see all of our email addresses on the screen and contact information. What I want to ask Holly to do, if you'll come back on, I know one of the things that we wanted to do was as a last kind of wrap up for this session is to look at, where do we go from here? Are you, would you want to stay in touch with others on this topic? What would be helpful to your organization? We want to, try to find those things out. So, Holly, I don't know if you want to try to get comments in chat or if we want to, recognize people to talk, but, throw it out.
Thanks, Terrence. Yeah, I would welcome comments in the chat right now. If folks want to just type things in, your thoughts about where we might go from here as a group. We discussed this a little bit in the breakout where I was, and folks said, yeah, it's really good to have the BTO family, they called it, talking about all these things together, amongst our organizations. And they suggested, again, creating perhaps a working group of interested parties from these organizations and maybe even trying some pilot projects together that might come out of that working group. So would welcome people's ideas in the chat. I would also welcome if folks have notes from their sessions and you didn't get to share today and you would like to share with us, you can feel free to email me some of those notes at the address on the slide that you see, my Holly Carr EE address. No requirement to share at all, but if you didn't get to and you really want to, we want to hear from you, certainly. It said, I'm seeing it would be nice to perhaps have an online platform or quarterly meetings. Enhance an existing group, the working group. See what else we're seeing here. So, we do have folks' emails, so we may reach out and take some of these ideas that we're hearing about ongoing engagement. You can certainly opt out of that and not participate further, but I think we are hearing some energy around this topic and some desire to continue to collaborate. Terrence, I'm going to turn it back over to you for thank yous. One thank you I want to reiterate is to Sia and the volunteers from Sia who helped facilitate these breakout groups. It really worked out nicely. So thanks for the conversations, everybody. Back to you,
Yep.
Terrence.
Absolutely. And I actually want to just, I can check. I didn't know if David was still on, if David wanted to give, I think, yeah, I see David's name. David, please feel free if there's any last comments you want to give, or if not, I'll close it out.
Up to you, Terrence.
What's that?
Why don't you close it out, and then I'm going to come back and close out the peer preview when you're done with this panel.
Sounds good. All right. Hey, everybody, like I said, we couldn't thank you enough for participating in this. And as I mentioned at the beginning, whatever way that you participated in this entire peer preview, but you know, especially for this session that we tried to pull together, we hope that it's been informative for you. We hope that you've learned from each other. And, you know, I think we did this in the spirit of sharing information, kind of sharing each other's journeys and trying to figure out what we can do to kind of bring this together to make a better buildings and energy efficiency industry. So with that being said, I think I will wrap this session up, call it a day, and I will pass it off to the well, David, you're the anchor man. You're the real anchor man. So, you know, the 4x100 has been run, and now I'm turning it over to you for the last stretch.
All right. Thanks, Terrence, and thanks,
Okay.
panel. Appreciate it. Look, it's been, I think, just a great 3 days. Look, before I talk about the peer preview, I would be remiss if I didn't remind everybody that not only are we hiring at BTO and we can hire expeditiously for certain people with certain backgrounds, such as engineers and physical scientists. So we are hiring, and part of accomplishing any of our missions that you've heard about over the last 3 days, certainly including diversity and equity and inclusion, requires a skilled, diverse workforce. So that's a reminder on that. But I'm here just to thank everybody for their contributions over the last 3 days. First, I want to, and if you could turn on your cameras, I want to cite just a few people of the many in particular who organized this. Jeremiah Freeman of BTO led our efforts. And Julia Downing of BTO, you can see both in there, say hi. They did a ton of work on this, as did Justin Townsend and Bruce Warford of the Oak Ridge Associated University team. I can't tell on my thing if Justin and Bruce are up there, but hey guys. And I want to thank the many BTO organizers who helped put this together. And I know I'll be forgetting people, but Jack Mayer, Nick Dale Hoffmeyer, Adam Haas, Monica Newcomb, Harry Bergman, Sven Mumi, Mary Hubbard, Karma Sawyer, Holly Carr, Terrence Mosley, and many, Lucy DeButts, and many others at BTO. I want to thank Assistant Secretary Daniel Simmons for finding time and for being so insightful and personal and personable on Monday when the Assistant Secretary shared his views on our issues, and Deputy Assistant Secretary Alex Fitzsimmons, who joined us yesterday. So thanks to them. But look, mostly, you know what I'm about to say here. Let's just keep changing. Mostly I want to say is thank you to the moderators, the people who don't work at BTO, who don't get paid by us to do this, the people who are moderators, the people who are panelists, who shared your work, your insights, and of course, thanks to all of you who are in the audience and participated over 3 days on these sessions, whether it's electrification or working with local governments, diversity, remote and virtual solutions to our problems, getting investments from investors, venture capital or other investors, or pitching our ideas via Impel or other mechanisms, or the eRobot Challenge or our foes, whatever it may be. We got a busy year in front of us, and thank you for spending 3 days with us. Everything will be posted, recordings, PowerPoints, everything else we can get our hands on, we will post on the BTO site. It takes a little while, but it'll be there. So I hope it's been as productive and informative for you all as it has for myself and all of us at BTO. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the course of the year at as often as we can. Bye.